Kindly help us to like, comment and subscribe to the channel for more of this. Sophie Harris, 32, never thought her biggest test would come not from business deals or bank loans, but from her own mother-in-law. A high school graduate who built a $10 million company from scratch. Sophie had grown up in the small town of Maple Ridge, Michigan. She wasn't born into wealth or opportunity. Her father worked at the local factory by day and delivered packages at night. Her mother cleaned houses and waited tables on weekends. Their small two-bedroom house wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. "We don't have much, but we have each other," her dad would say, handing her a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Sophie shared her room with storage bins and her mother's cleaning supplies, yet never complained. She learned early to stretch every dollar, wearing thrift store clothes and getting creative with style. At 15, she began making and selling beaded bracelets to classmates, using money from babysitting jobs to buy materials. "You made these?" her teacher asked one afternoon. "That's impressive, Sophie." It was the first time she saw the power of creating something on her own. That same year she was paired in chemistry class with Liam Parker, the son of one of the richest families in town. With wavy brown hair and warm hazel eyes, Liam was confident, kind, and headed to a top university. Sophie expected him to be arrogant, but instead he said, "You're the one who sells bracelets, right? That's pretty cool." "Just something I do for cash," Sophie shrugged. "Nah," Liam smiled. "It's smart. Most kids just ask their parents for money." That moment changed everything. Liam saw something in Sophie that no one else had, and she wasn't about to forget it. Or are you watching from today? Hit like and subscribe. Sophie and Liam worked well together in chemistry class. He was imaginative while she was careful and exact. Their experiments always went smoothly and they quickly became the top pair in the class. But it wasn't just about science. Their talks wandered far from school. They laughed about childhood memories, shared their favorite movies and slowly learned each other's fears and dreams. "I've never met anyone like you," Liam said one afternoon as they cleaned up a messy lab experiment. "You work so hard for everything." Sophie blushed. "Well, no one's handing it to me, that's for sure." 3 months into the semester, Liam asked her out. Their first date was at a small local diner, where Sophie's mom just happened to be working that night. Sophie wanted to sink into the floor when her mom showed up at their table. "Hi, sweetheart. Want the usual?" she asked with a wink. Liam just smiled and said, "You must be Mrs. Harris. Thanks for raising such a brilliant daughter." Sophie's mom beamed. That was Liam, easygoing, respectful and sincere. Meeting Liam's family was another story. The Parkers lived in a huge home in Lakeside Ridge, where the lawns looked freshly trimmed year-round and the neighbors drove luxury cars. When Sophie walked in, she immediately felt out of place. Liam's mother, Deborah Parker, greeted her with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So you're the girl Liam's been talking about," she said, looking her up and down. "What does your father do again?" "He works at Maple Ridge Steel," Sophie replied, lifting her chin slightly. "Oh, that's charming," Deborah replied, clearly unimpressed. Liam's father, Gerald, a successful attorney, was more welcoming. "Hard work builds character," he said with a firm handshake. Liam's siblings, Rachel and Matt, were cordial but distant, their quiet glances saying more than their polite words. Despite the cold welcome, Liam never wavered. "I don't care what they think," he told Sophie. "I know who you are. That's what matters." As senior year ended, Liam received his acceptance letter to Columbia University, just like his parents had hoped. Sophie hadn't applied anywhere. "I can't afford it," she said simply. "Besides, I have other plans." Liam was surprised. "You're smart enough for a scholarship." "Maybe," Sophie admitted, "but I want to work. Save up. Start something of my own one day." Liam didn't try to push her. He just nodded and said, "Then I'll cheer you on every step of the way." His parents, however, were less understanding, especially Deborah. "You're really going to throw away your future for a girl who sells bracelets?" she asked him during a heated conversation. "She's got more drive than anyone I know," Liam snapped back. "Just because she didn't take the same path doesn't mean she doesn't have a future." Sophie knew he'd defended her, but she also knew his mother's words had left a scar. Still, they promised to try long distance. He would head to New York and she'd stay behind to work. While Liam settled into college life, Sophie took 2 retail jobs and spent her evenings at the public library, teaching herself digital marketing and graphic design from free online courses. "You're here every night," the librarian said once with a smile. "Starting a business or something?" Sophie nodded. "Trying to." At 22, Sophie had saved just enough to buy a decent second-hand laptop. She started her first real business, a social media management service for small local shops. Her office was her parents' garage, and her first 2 clients were a flower shop and a local gym. She barely made enough to cover her phone bill, but Liam kept cheering her on. "You're building something," he'd say over the phone. "Even when it's hard. That's what makes it real." His words mattered, especially when no one else believed in her dream. By the time Liam graduated, Sophie's business was still tiny but steady. That summer he proposed during a quiet picnic by the lake. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted, pulling out a tiny silver band from his keychain. "But I do have a heart that's yours completely." Sophie laughed and cried at the same time. "Then I guess you'll just have to spend forever proving it." The engagement party at the Parker house was a cold contrast to their warm proposal. Deborah wore a forced smile, clinking champagne glasses while whispering behind Sophie's back. "Liam always had a soft heart," she told her sister. "Hopefully she doesn't ruin him." Sophie heard it. She said nothing, but her heart hardened. Their wedding was modest but beautiful, held in a local garden filled with blooming tulips and daisies. Sophie's parents dipped into their tiny savings to help, and Liam's parents contributed just enough to claim credit. During the reception, Deborah cornered Sophie near the restrooms. "You should be grateful," she said, holding a glass of wine. "Not many girls from your background marry up." Sophie met her gaze and replied, "And not many men from yours see value in someone like me. I guess Liam's the exception." Deborah blinked, not used to being challenged. But Sophie was learning how to stand her ground without losing grace. After the wedding, Sophie and Liam moved into a small one-bedroom apartment. Liam started a job at a financial firm downtown, wearing suits paid for by his parents. Sophie worked from a tiny desk in their closet. "We'll make it work," she told Liam, taping a whiteboard to the wall. "This is our HQ now." Their evenings were filled with cheap takeout, secondhand movies, and big dreams. But business wasn't easy. Sophie lost her biggest client after 3 months. Then her laptop crashed, wiping out weeks of work. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," she whispered one night, eyes wet. Liam wrapped his arms around her. "Then we'll fail forward. But we won't stop." Sophie launched a second business, an online shop selling curated vintage clothes. But the competition was fierce. Large retailers undercut her prices. Shipping delays killed her momentum. "Another failure," she sighed, staring at her almost empty store dashboard. At Christmas dinner, Deborah twisted the knife. "Have you thought about taking a few college classes?" she asked sweetly. "Even community college can help you catch up." Liam glared at her. "Mom." "What?" "I'm just saying. 2 failed businesses in 1 year." Sophie smiled calmly. "You know, every failure's been a better teacher than any professor I never had." Deborah laughed, but Sophie meant every word. Everything changed when Sophie helped a friend promote her small bakery on social media. She crafted a campaign centered around the baker's story, how each recipe came from her grandmother's kitchen. The campaign exploded. Orders tripled in a month. "You're a genius," her friend gushed. Word spread fast. Soon, 3 more local businesses reached out. Sophie had found her edge, not just marketing but storytelling. She named her business Storyline Social, and began working 16-hour days from their apartment. Liam would come home to find her still in pajamas, her face lit by the glow of her laptop. "You're on fire," he'd say, kissing her forehead. "Don't stop now." Sophie's storytelling style set her apart. While other agencies pushed sleazy posts, she made people feel something. When she landed her first big client, a chain of local fitness centers, she used real customer stories to create emotional, uplifting campaigns. "I lost 40 pounds here and found myself," read one caption beside a smiling mom of 3. The campaign went viral and the gym's membership shot up by 30%. Liam couldn't stop smiling when she showed him the numbers. "You did this," he said, holding the printout like it was a trophy. "No," Sophie corrected. "We did. You kept believing even when I didn't." During dinner at the Parkers one evening, Sophie shared her recent success, hoping for just a hint of approval. Deborah sipped her wine and said, "Well, I hope they're paying you properly. Small businesses often think exposure is enough." Sophie smiled tightly. They signed a 6-figure contract. Deborah raised an eyebrow. "Let's see if they renew it." Gerald nodded with a slow, impressed expression but stayed silent. The rest of the evening passed with stiff smiles and subtle digs, but Sophie walked out with her head high. She was beginning to understand that success wouldn't change Deborah's opinion. And maybe it didn't need to. The client did renew, and referred Sophie to others. By the end of that year she had 7 major contracts. Her small apartment was filled with sticky notes, order sheets, and the energy of something big beginning. Liam uncorked a cheap bottle of champagne after every new contract. "I should buy stock in bubbles," he joked, raising his glass. "To you, no to us," Sophie replied. "You're the reason I didn't give up." She'd built momentum, and for the first time she felt like a real CEO. Storyline Social was no longer an idea in a notebook. It was becoming a force. By their 3rd wedding anniversary, Sophie had hired 3 full-time employees and moved into a small office downtown. Clients were now reaching out from other states. What made Storyline Social different was the heart behind every campaign. "We tell stories, not just sell products," Sophie often told her team. "That's why people remember us." Liam's pride in her was obvious. He boasted about her in social circles, calling her a genius in branding. "She's changing the industry," he'd say, eyes shining. But not everyone shared his admiration. At family events, Deborah's smiles grew thinner and her compliments more backhanded. "It's amazing what people can do with a Wi-Fi signal these days," she once said. When Sophie's income passed Liam's for the first time, he was stunned, but thrilled. "This is, wow," he said, staring at the numbers. "You've built something incredible." "We built it," she reminded him. With their combined savings they bought their first home. A modest but lovely 4-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. Sophie insisted on doing it without help from Liam's parents. "I want this to be ours, not a gift," she said. Liam agreed, though Sophie sensed his hesitation. At the housewarming party, the differences between their families were on full display. Her parents brought homemade casseroles and helped clean up. The Parkers arrived right on time with expensive wine and critiques about the decor. "This is cute," Deborah said, scanning the house. "A good starter home." Sophie nodded. "We plan to stay for a while. We love it here." Gerald remained quiet but respectful. Rachel and Matt barely looked up from their phones. Still, Sophie didn't let it dampen her mood. She was proud of what they'd built, brick by brick without shortcuts. Liam supported her fully. He called her his partner, his inspiration, his equal. But each time they visited his family, Sophie could feel herself shrinking just a little, biting her tongue to keep the peace, smiling through discomfort. It was a pattern that would eventually break. As Storyline Social continued to grow, Sophie noticed the subtle shift in how the world treated her. Clients respected her insight. Employees looked to her for leadership. But Deborah? She only doubled down on her skepticism. "Who knew a little online business could go so far?" she said at one dinner. "Still, nothing beats a good education." Gerald, however, started asking questions, real ones, about market trends and content strategy. He even sat through one of Sophie's presentations during a family lunch and said, "You know what you're doing." That was the closest thing to a compliment she'd ever received from him. The turning point came when Rachel lost her job and called Sophie crying. "I can't afford rent," she said. "I don't know what to do." Without hesitation, Sophie offered help. "We'll cover your loan payments while you get back on your feet." Deborah bristled at the offer. "We don't need charity," she said. "It's not charity," Liam replied. "It's support." Sophie quietly enrolled Rachel in a digital design program and paid her rent for 6 months. The gratitude in Rachel's voice meant everything. Sophie had grown up with so little that giving back felt like healing. But for Deborah it felt like a loss of control. Soon after, Matt was diagnosed with a rare condition that required treatment not covered by insurance. "We'll handle it," Sophie said before anyone else could speak. She wired the money, $45,000, without hesitation. When Matt tried to protest, Sophie simply said, "Family helps family." Deborah's reaction was harder to read. She was quieter after that, her eyes unreadable during family meals. Gerald pulled Sophie aside once. "What you've done for my kids. I won't forget that," he said. But still the praise never came from Deborah's mouth. Just silence and the occasional passive-aggressive jab. Sophie no longer expected approval. But what came next caught her completely off guard. At Thanksgiving dinner, after a toast to gratitude and family, Deborah raised her glass and said, "Let's also be thankful for internet businesses. They make it easy to look successful even without real education." The room went quiet. Gerald coughed. "Deborah," but Sophie interrupted. "Education comes in many forms. Some people get degrees. Others get life experience. And some," Deborah replied with a smirk, "just get lucky." Sophie smiled. "Maybe. But it's funny how luck always seems to show up when you work 16-hour days and take risks no one else will." Liam took her hand under the table. "She's not lucky," he said softly. "She's extraordinary." But Sophie knew, this war wasn't over yet. By year 5, Storyline Social had grown into a $10 million brand with 22 employees and clients across the country. Sophie's face appeared in business magazines, and she was invited to speak at national marketing conferences. Liam left his corporate job to join the company as Chief Operations Officer. "We started this together," he said during his welcome speech to the team. "And we'll keep building it together." Deborah's resentment deepened. The more Sophie succeeded, the colder her mother-in-law became. Every win felt like another stone between them, but Sophie didn't let it stop her. She had found her rhythm and her voice. Eventually they moved to Lakeside Ridge, the very neighborhood where Liam had grown up. Their new home wasn't far from the Parkers. "Maybe now she'll see I belong," Sophie told Liam. But things didn't improve. Sunday dinners became battlegrounds of polite digs and thinly veiled insults. When Sophie announced an expansion into Chicago, Deborah said, "That's lovely. Just don't forget your husband and all your traveling." Grace, now a close ally, rolled her eyes. "Mom, really?" Gerald remained quietly supportive, asking about profits and growth, but never confronting his wife's behavior. It was Liam who started to bend under the weight of it all. Then came the dinner that changed everything. Deborah threw a party for Grace's new job. Sophie dressed carefully, choosing a sleek dress and pearl earrings Liam had given her. "Tonight's about Grace," she told herself. But from the moment she walked into the Parkers' mansion, Deborah was already on her second glass of wine. The jabs came quicker than usual. "I suppose it helps to have a wealthy sister-in-law," she said loudly, referring to Sophie. The room fell silent. Liam's hand tightened around Sophie's, but no one else said a word. By the time dinner was served, the tension was unbearable. Deborah, clearly drunk, began listing her grievances in front of friends and family. "We've all had to pretend for 7 years," she said bitterly, "that this girl, this uneducated girl, belongs here. He doesn't. She's just playing rich with her little Instagram company." Liam stood up so fast his chair fell over. "That's enough, Mom." But she continued. "What kind of man lives off his wife's money?" Sophie calmly placed her napkin on the table. "A secure one. And a smart one." Deborah's voice rose. "You've turned him against us. You think money makes you better than where you came from? You're still uneducated trash." Silence. "I think we're done here," Sophie said, standing up. Grace and Matt lowered their heads, ashamed. Gerald said nothing. "Thank you for confirming what you've been saying behind my back for years." Liam tried to follow Sophie out. "No," she said. "Stay. Talk to your mother. I'll see you at home." She left the Parker mansion with her head high and heart pounding. That night she cried alone, not out of sadness but relief. She no longer had to pretend. After years of fighting for a place at their table, she finally realized she didn't want to sit there anymore. Liam came home after midnight. "She's not sorry," he admitted. "She said she drank too much and didn't mean it like it sounded." Sophie laughed bitterly. "That's not an apology." They sat in silence on the patio. "I need space," Sophie said softly. "I'm going to Hawaii. Alone." Liam was stunned. "What does that mean for us?" "It means I need to remember who I am without your mother's voice in my head." The next morning she flew to their vacation home in Kauai and spent days resting, walking the beach and breathing freely for the first time in years. Liam called every day, at first to check in, then to urge her to return. "We need to move forward as a family," he said. We're not a family with your mother, Sophie replied. Grace called too. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. And if you stay in Hawaii, I understand. That support meant everything. But when Sophie learned Liam had told his siblings she might stay permanently, before discussing it with her, she felt betrayed. When she confronted him, the conversation ended in frustration. You're punishing us for her mistake, Liam said. Sophie disagreed. I'm protecting myself. Finally. 3 weeks later, Liam showed up in Hawaii unannounced. I couldn't go another day without seeing you, he said. Sophie let him stay but set clear boundaries. They started couples therapy and began untangling the web of silence, guilt and misplaced loyalty. When Deborah called with a weak apology, Sophie responded calmly. Until your words are followed by real change, I want no contact. Liam backed her for the first time, firmly and publicly. It was a turning point. They decided to make Hawaii their permanent home and open a second office for Storyline Social on the West Coast. Together on their own terms. A year later, everything was different. Deborah visited once, subdued and cautious. Sophie didn't seek her approval anymore. She didn't need it. Her focus was on growing her business, loving her husband and protecting her peace. I still don't understand how someone like you succeeded, Deborah muttered once. Sophie smiled. That's okay. I'm not building this life for you to understand. As Storyline Social expanded nationally and Sophie's name appeared on Forbes lists, she no longer looked back. She had proven her worth. Not. Moral lesson. True success isn't about earning approval from those who look down on you. It's about knowing your worth, setting boundaries and building a life where respect is non-negotiable.